Welcome everybody again. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Get Real with AI webinar series brought to you by ActiveOps. Today's topic is all about data and why it's one of the key barriers to adopting AI. It's a topic that we'll be discussing over the next hour. So before we jump into the topic, let's just make some introductions to our panelists and our speakers for this hour session. So first of all, an introduction to myself. My name is Bhavesh Vaghela. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at ActiveOps. I'm delighted to be your host for this webinar. Let me introduce you to my colleague, Tom Bradley. Tom, do you want to say a few quick words?
Yes, thanks, Bhavesh. Hi, everyone. My name's Tom Bradley. I'm an analyst over here at ActiveOps. I'll be taking us through the global research that we did and the APAC specific statistics that we've got. So looking forward to taking you through that.
Fantastic. And we've got a very strong panelist of experts who are ops folks. So let me introduce them in the order that's on the screen. So first of all, welcome, Anna. If you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your role.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Itsiopoulos. I work for ActiveOps and I'm the Managing Director of the Asia Pacific region.
Fantastic. Thank you, Anna. And then Paul. Welcome, Paul.
Takes 5 minutes to come off mute. How are we doing, everybody? As you can see there on the screen, I look after operational excellence for Bendigo and Adelaide Bank. I've been in banking and operational roles for longer than I would care to admit on this here. So looking forward to this.
Welcome, Paul. And then we've got Anthony Templar. Anthony, welcome.
Hi, all, and thank you. I'm Anthony Templar. I was recently head of servicing at ANZ. I'm now spending some time as a management consultant focused on workforce planning and operations management. I'm much younger than Paul, of course, so I don't have quite as much experience, but I've got a little bit under my belt as well.
Fantastic. Welcome, Anthony. And then finally, Tim. Welcome, Tim.
Hello, yeah, Tim Williams, based in Melbourne, a partner with PwC where I've been for 10 years now, and I lead our operations transformation practice, so about 150 people nationally. And before PwC, I worked for Barclays Bank in the UK where I led call centres and processing centres, so I've got many years of working with and alongside ActiveOps.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Anna, Paul, Anthony and Tim for joining us. Hopefully you can all see we've got a great panelist of experts who have been ops leaders in the field currently or in the past to kind of help us discuss this really critical topic and the challenge that we're all faced with as operational leaders around the world. So let's jump into that topic a little bit more. Let me just give a quick introduction to it. And if you think about where we're heading from an ops perspective, we certainly at ActiveOps believe we're moving into the next wave of operational transformation, largely driven by the impact of AI and what AI is able to help us with. And if you think about where we're all going from an organizational perspective, we're all in the middle of transformation exercises, which have been going on for many, many years as we continue to evolve and modernize. We're, heavily into digitization strategies as we're trying to drive better customer experience and drive the engagement we have with our customers. We're looking for simplification, and automation is a big area that a lot of organizations are looking to do. And also, being very data centric is something that's becoming more and more central to the organizations we all engage with and work with. So when you think about that, the future of operations certainly feels like it will have less people, and there's a definite desire that we become more efficient with what we're doing, and that will be driven largely by automating more and more of what we do in the operational arena. Now, if you think about any of those two things, none of that is really achievable without good quality data in order to drive the initiatives that you're trying to drive. So, when you think about that pretty immediate future, it's all about using data, and it needs to be smart, accurate, predictive, prescriptive in order to help you make better decisions. So when you think about that data journey, then, where are we? One of the questions we were trying to understand is, where are we? What's the kind of starting point from an operations perspective? So we created a very simple kind of maturity set of steps around, organizations and where they could be from a data perspective. And on the left hand side, you've got that manual data drudgery and the death by dashboards, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with and nodding their heads that they're all in that kind of space. And we all know that environment, siloed data, Excel spreadsheets, all different types of things different types of things that you're struggling with, all the way through to this kind of desire to be able to transform then, where in order to think about the future of ops, the AI is very much realized. Descriptive, predictive, prescriptive analytics is very critical towards being able to do that, and in order to drive that automation agenda and the simplification agenda that we're all looking to do. So the question in our mind is, where are we? What's the operations world look like? So in order to do that, we commissioned some market research. So I'm going to hand over to Tom, who's going to share a little bit of the insights from that research. And that research paper is now available. So if you haven't seen it, you can feel free to download it and see a lot more detail than Tom will go through today. So Tom, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Bhavesh. So just to set the scene a little bit, the research that we did along the way, we asked 16 questions to various different senior level managers within operations across 7 different countries across the world, just to understand the maturity of data and how people have adopted AI for operations throughout financial services across the world and healthcare within the US. That research is available to download from the link that is now in the chat. And the overarching theme of this data is that ops leaders can't make critical decisions due to poor data. So it's looking at that sort of state of operations within financial services. So within this, we've got sort of 3 key themes that we're going to look at. We're going to look at AI adoption and the importance of that and how people feel about AI within operations. We'll look at the barriers to that within APAC and what people are finding difficult about adopting that AI, and then any data challenges that people are facing as well. So if we move into the first section, we'll see that sort of just under 90%, 86% of people believe that the adoption of AI will improve customer experience, employee engagement, and effective decision making. Now, these things are all really key to the priorities that operations leaders had for the year. So it showcases that with the adoption of AI, their priorities are more likely to be achieved. So it's just a really key thing to look at there, that if they were to use AI, it's going to help them to achieve their goals. When it comes to the adoption of AI within APAC, we've got just under half that are only just starting out using AI or aren't using it at all. Now, the numbers are really starkly different here when it comes to the AI adoption levels, with New Zealand being much lower when it comes to starting out because they're so much further advanced in terms of AI adoption. They are, in fact, from the 7 countries that we've surveyed, they are the most advanced. So there are 2/3 that are either advanced or very advanced from our survey results, whereas the numbers within Australia are much lower. So you've got 3 in 5 people that are only just starting out or aren't using it at all, about 40% that are advanced or very advanced. So the difference is quite stark between the 2 countries at the moment. And then there's this is sort of the highest statistic that we've got when it comes to what people believe AI will help with. So it's 2 in 5 believing that the adoption of AI will produce deeper and more meaningful insights, alongside sort of more automation within tasks and more efficient task completion. They're the sort of highest stats that we've got for AI there. But there are a number of things that are stopping that AI adoption, regardless of how advanced it might be. And one of the key things here, and again, it is a stark difference between the 2 countries, but about job displacement. So due to the advanced adoption within New Zealand, the worry about job displacement is much lower, likely because they've already adopted AI. They've seen that it's there to enhance the workforce rather than replace it. So they're less concerned about adoption. Those numbers are much higher in Australia, and they're higher across the world as well. We're up to sort of 62% in Ireland, 65% in South Africa. So there's a real concern about this job displacement. But the correlation between the worry of job displacement and the level of AI adoption is quite clear. The more advanced you are, the less worried you are about job displacement. So that's, but overall within the two countries, it's about a third that are concerned about job displacement due to AI adoption. And then the other two stats that are quite key to see are around support within the business. So just over half believe that service operations teams don't get the necessary support from IT and other areas of the business. Again, the numbers, they're quite stark in difference across the two countries. So there is a belief within New Zealand that people get more support than they do in Australia. And then the other statistic is around data skills. So there are about 3 in 5 believe they don't have the right data skills to take advantage of AI. But what we've established when looking through the research is that the skills are there. It's just that people don't realize they have those capabilities. And if they don't, then there's simple training that they can be that can be done so they can learn how to use that AI, the AI technology along the way. So the barriers to AI adoption, amongst others, are around job displacement, support within the business, and data skills that the team might have. But not only are these barriers there, the data challenges are probably some of the biggest issues there as well. And if we look here, around 2 in 5 believe that they can't access the right data to make critical decisions. So the data is there, but they don't know which bit to look at, or they can't get to that right piece of data because there is just so much data. And they also believe that the metrics and terms used across the business are inconsistent. So sometimes people will be using one phrase or one term, and others will be using a different one. Different metrics will be looked at by different areas of the business, which then confuses matters somewhat. And there are the other big issue that we'd seen within the data was that there's just too much data. So sometimes there's too much data and they can't access it. Sometimes there's too much data and then there's just, it's like looking at the matrix. It's all just a bit too much for people, so they don't know what to look at along the way. But the other two data issues that are quite key here, and they're big in both countries, both New Zealand and Australia, are around effort to gain insights and the use of real-time data. So 97%, and it's 100% in Australia, it's every single senior manager of operations that was surveyed, feel it takes significant effort to gain insights. Now, the lower that number is, what we can infer that the lower that number is, the more an AI is helping to gain those insights rather than doing, as Bhavesh stated, that sort of manual data drudgery or the death by spreadsheets. So that effort that goes into it is just sort of purely wasted resource because people are using so much of their time and effort to get those insights, where if they had an AI tech there with them, it would be able to establish more of those insights for them and in a more efficient manner. So that level would go down, and the amount of resource that they'll be using would be going into more fruitful endeavors. So that's the one, and the other one is around using real-time data. Now, 96% across APAC are not using real-time data, only 4% are. And the highest number for this across the world was in the UK, where 10% of people are using real-time data. Now, within the survey, we sort of we put different time structures in there so that people could choose from whether it was real-time data, a day old, 2 to 6 days old, a week old. So it's quite clear that real-time data was seen as data that is less than 24 hours old. And the fact that people saw that they were admitted that they weren't using real-time data means that any critical decisions that are being made from data that is out of date or is too old to make those decisions. In fact, some of the numbers around the data being a month old, 2 to 3 months old, or 3 months and older was really quite high when you look at that data. So it's showcasing that the data being used in order to feed the AI or in order to feed the team in order to gain insights is then out of date, and it means that those critical decisions that are being made are going to be outdated immediately. So just to summarize here before we jump back into the Q&A, Ops leaders are optimistic over AI and completely understand the benefits that it will bring. They clearly see that the priorities they have for the year can be achieved and more efficiently through the use of AI. But there is a fear of adoption due to that lack of support, due to the lack of skills and the worry about job displacement. And those data challenges are clearly holding those ops teams back, because it means that those critical decisions that will be made will be either outdated or not made in the right time. So I will now hand back to Bhavesh.
Thank you, Tom. Some really interesting stats there in terms of what's happening within the Australia and New Zealand market, but also a comparison to the other 7 countries. So let's jump into the discussion then, because if I can invite the panelists back on screen, and I understand there was some challenges for attendees joining the webinar at the start. So I'm just going to introduce the panel again, if that's okay, for those of people who weren't able to join straight away. So I'll go around the panelist again. So Paul, if I can just ask you very quickly just to do a quick intro again, if that's okay.
Yeah, still me, still Paul, still working at Bendigo, Adelaide, and still old and have been in the game too long.
Anthony?
I'm still Anthony Templar, recently at ANZ, now doing management consulting on operational management, workforce planning, still younger than Paul.
Great. And Anna?
Anna Itsiopoulos, with ActiveOps, the Managing Director of the Asia Pacific region. And I think I probably have more years than Paul in terms of operations. So, but I won't say how many those years are, but it's in decades. So there you go.
Let's not ask. Tim?
I'm becoming the benchmark here for where everybody sits in the
And Tim,
I might lose on the stakes of time in role, but being with PwC for 10 years, lead the operations transformation practice there.
Fantastic. Well, listen, thank you again all for joining the panel. So it's a very interesting time for operations, as you've seen in obviously the day-to-day roles that you engage with within your organizations and the companies you work for. And this whole idea of AI and data is definitely becoming more and more an imperative towards the future of ops. So first, perhaps we can start by just trying to gauge your view on the stats you've just seen. Did anything surprise you? Were you that surprised by what you saw? Perhaps I can maybe start with you, Paul, because you're just in the order on the screen that I've got in front of you. What were your thoughts on those data points that Tom shared?
None of it surprised me. I think I would challenge a lot of the data in there and agree that those are the perceptions and the feelings of senior managers, and they're the realities of some of those points. Once you often unpick it, are somewhat different. Touching on your point on real time, what is real time in an operational environment? How much do we actually need real time, and where do we need to apply real time? What are those real time decisions that, if you have your resources established, you understand your volumes and you've got them productive and effective on the day, where do you really need to have real time reporting? So the need to have real time reporting is for what? And I'd always challenge it, if you've got your other things up front and you're well balanced and in play, you should only have that for more small allocations in the moment. And God, you guys know better than me about loading and balancing sessions and making sure we've got them in place. So if you've got that rhythm going, you shouldn't really need to have too much focus on real time. So I would tend to get less distracted on trying to treat an ops center like a call center in that space. But it's no doubt that allocations of AI will certainly help. The other thing is, where AI is going to lean on is more broadly, and I think I said there it was a lot of the operational leads were optimistic yet unsure. I don't think it's really dawned on a lot of people what the impact of AI is truly going to have here, particularly in the roles that we're talking about, in the areas that we're talking about. But way beyond that, we are not talking AI launching into operations. We tend to think about it as streamlining the industrial machinery. AI is going to have an impact, probably first of all, in a lot of the roles that we've got around here, in the support roles, in enablement roles, in legal roles, coaching roles. When myself and Tim are working on something to look at how we develop AI coaching models, for example, that radically changes the aspects of a leader role in there. When you have that people kind of industrial component that's suddenly gone from them.
Yeah.
So these are the functions I think AI that you tend to think of it as, oh, it'll help me automate and streamline, and I'll get some funky data coming up. It's going to do something a way lot more than that, and it's coming hard and fast. And I would argue it's here now.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very valid observation, and I think you're right in terms of it's coming, it's already here, and it's quick, right? It's going to be a wave that comes, and it's one of these reasons why we genuinely believe we're entering this kind of next transformational wave for ops. Anthony, what's your view? I mean, in terms of your background at ANZ and your experience in just the kind of the state of play within data and ops and ops together.
Yeah, thanks, Bhavesh. So I think, so first of all, it was no surprise for someone who spent a few years in New Zealand. It was no surprise to see the guys across the ditch were ahead of the game, and they've been for a long time on technology. To go around some of Paul's comments around the real time, I think if you split that into two channels, there's one about processing, and I think if you're in fraud or if you're in customer protection, then you absolutely need that real-time live data, and that you can see that AI would have a tremendous value with that live data. Most other businesses, I mean, to Paul's point, you don't need that if you're doing mortgage processing. You don't need that if you're doing annual reviews for business banking clients. From a production management perspective, I think that real-time data, I was really disappointed, not surprised, but disappointed to see those stats. I think if you look at it from a production management perspective, there is a great opportunity to have that real live data and be able to really, and by live, I mean certainly a day, but that 1 to 3 days, to understand, even if it's down to that micro level of, we've noticed that Tim's call quality or his handle time has really dropped off in the mornings, and there's an opportunity for us to talk to him and to coach with him. And I think, there is great value there, and if we're not using real-time data, then we miss those opportunities, and sometimes they are opportunities that are in the moment, and then they're gone, and perhaps we never really unpacked. Tim might have been lamenting the loss of a pet and was struggling. There's an opportunity for us to help him, and we missed that chance. So I think that there's work that we could do there. From an overall AI perspective, I think Paul's certainly right. Most people in operations who still think they can solve the problems of the world with an Excel spreadsheet have not yet truly appreciated what can be done. And I think as we get a little bit further down the line and people really start to unpack the potential, then I think you'll find a really rapid increase in people's confidence and desire to be a part of it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Tim, first of all, I'm sorry you're not performing very well, and apologies about your pet. But what's your view on all this? I mean, you obviously, in your role, engage with a lot of customers in an ops perspective. Are you seeing some these kind of trends familiar to you in what you're seeing in the customer environments?
I think they are. I think to Paul's point, where you're dealing with call centers and things like that, or those kind of, the data is a lot better in those environments. But when you step out of those environments, you're seeing across most of the operations in Australia, there are some real issues with data and challenges with data. And I think as a function of that people are very early in the AI journey. But again, to Paul's point, there's enormous opportunity there, and I think it's going to accelerate very quickly. Some of the challenges that I've seen that probably are coming out in the thematics that you've drawn out are things like there's multiple sources of data and lots of different definitions, lots of data off of core systems, lots of manual effort, rekeying of data, stuff in spreadsheets, timeliness issues around how often data comes through and how frequently, how granular it is, to the point you made, Anthony, around being able to understand the root causes of what's going on and get really specific, but also the completeness of that data. So being able to see everything from productivity and performance right through to customer and quality, and triangulate a story across all of that.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess, Anna, from your perspective, I mean, why do you think ops leaders are struggling so much with data? What's the drivers behind it? I mean, it feels, from my perspective, I remember doing BI in the 15, 20 years ago, and this whole journey about data becoming more centric to all types of decision making, and we still seem to be in a place where it still seems like a bit of a quagmire of a mess in certain parts of operations. Why do you think that struggle's there?
Oh, look, I don't think it's just operations struggling with data. I think it's an organisation-wide issue. Again, I think organisations have so much data. It's in so many systems, and many of those legacy. You know, I love to tell a story. I was in a previous role where I was running a very large call centre. My team needed to log into 17 different systems to be able to do their jobs, right? So that's 17 different systems holding data. So there's a challenge on how you synthesize that, how you actually get meaningful insights from that. So first point is, I don't think it's a specific to operations issue. I think it's an organisation-wide issue. And back to the point about real time, I think, and again, it depends what the respondents were thinking about at the time when they're thinking real time, because often, particularly with management information, but that does take time. You know, leaders often need technology support to extract data from systems. That's not always quick. If we think about financial data that we need to make decisions on, you know, I've yet to see an organisation that produces their financial data the day after the end of a month. You know, that often takes a very long time. So I think it is all about the amount of data people have, the number of systems, and trying to work out what data do I need. And this goes a little bit back to Paul's point. What data do I really need? How am I going to get it? You know, I think that's part of the challenge.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very fair observation. I mean, Paul, can I come to you in terms of, I mean, you're going through a transformation journey as all of you on the call are. I mean, can you kind of think back to kind of the challenges that you're trying to solve and how you've gone about some of the data challenges that you've implemented?
No challenges I've solved the world. We are perfectly fine. Oh, look, just data challenges, no matter how much that we fix it, are always going to be top of the list for data. And I always think it's like, you know, the number one thing for people to kind of get into. I think it's chasing rainbows. You never hit the end of it with this. You always want more data, more insights. So I think I would flip the question. You touched on it there, Anna. I don't think it's data. I think it's insight. We're going to get led much more insightfully read. The data is there. It's how you package it and push it through. The biggest challenge I see when I look at AI, the key platform, or the key thing you have to do first is get your data in a packaged environment, a packaged place that the AI can then land from. And those of you who've tried any AI models realize that you hit a roadblock with your business cases initially because your data is all over the effing place. That said, this is where you can apply AI to solve those data solutions in its first place. So I think the first thing that we're going to do, we being the operative areas, will be how we use AI to bring some of those data sets together and give us those insightful moments that you could then package up and build AI and insight models on. Second thing, I think, as I think about it as well, and I've just come off a group risk session, is the element of risk in all this. We tend to get super excited on all the opportunities. I'm sounding like a miserable Scotsman here, but we tend to think about AI as a super excitable tool that's going to give us this, it's going to give us that, it's going to give us this, and it's all true and all probable. We tend not to think about what we're giving away when we're doing that, and this is where I think we talk about it here as being human when it matters, and digital or AI where we need it. And the decision-making points are going to come across. There's no question of that. Key decision-making roles, advice roles, support roles, coaching are all going to become more and more AI-centric. The more that these large language models start to become more intelligent and start to become more articulate, the more that it's going to get into that space, even eventually, you know, superseding, I think, a lot of the activities a contact center can do. I can really see that in the next few years coming across. Well, we're about 2 or 3 years away, maybe even less than that, from AI causing the first death. And I read a survey on that, on advice and on support. So a decision that AI engine will make, will they think in Europe, we're about 1 or 2 years away from causing the first death. And when that happens, there will be a significant response around where we apply these tools and capabilities, the regulation that we've got around them, and the risk establishment that we've got. Where do we apply it? how do we understand its bias? How are we using it? There will be regulations applied, and we're not at that point yet. This is like the early days of the web. I see that we're taking this through. So that regulation will need to come in, and that's, I think, we're kind of putting the business cases and the exciting things that we can do up front, and at the same point finding our way through. Oh, we probably need to regulate this a bit tighter. It's going to be one or two things that are going to happen that's going to flick that dial. So we're beginning to look at that. How do we regulate? How do we make sure we're safe? How do we make sure we apply it in the right place? And how do we make sure that we keep that humanity, that human connection still in where we need to have it?
Yeah, that makes. I mean, you make. If I can come back to one of the early points you made around data into insight, right? So that's clearly what this is all about in some ways, is giving either the machine or the human the insights to make the decisions they need to make. What that immediately gets to is trust, and whether you trust the insight that's coming from the data that you have. And one of the stats that we didn't share that Tom was going through, but if you download the paper, you'll see a lot more stats. One of those stats was around trusting of data and insights, and there was a quite high percentage that didn't actually trust the data that was, or the insights that were coming out. And that's, again, a big challenge, right? When you're trying to use those insights more effectively. Anthony, have you seen that kind of barrier towards using insights within your environments and that trust factor?
Yeah, I was just going to say there, Bhavesh, I think that is a perfect demonstration of where the benefit of AI today kind of fades out, and the importance of having strong management really comes in, because I can get an insight from the data, and if we use the example of Tim, I can get the insight from the data that says this week Tim has been off his game in the morning, but then a strong and empathetic manager is the one who needs to sit down and say, mate, is there a problem? So today, you're not going to get an AI model that's going to understand what that problem is. They're not going to be able to say, hey, for now, can we move it to later shifts? Is there other things that we can do? So I think, from there, yes, the insight is there. But again, you've got to have someone's willingness to lean in on it and say, well, then what are we going to do about it? Because you're right, it gives you the insight, but it's not necessarily going to give you that underlying, that root cause. And I think that's where we as humans, at least for today, can still add value into the process. If I can just go back to something that Paul said, I thought was really spot on, and I'm paraphrasing about that sort of notion of junk in and junk out. I know a lot of this conversation is kind of positioned around how we work with AI in ops. Don't ever, for any of the ops guys out there, don't underplay the benefit that we get from moving it down the pipe. For me, a great experience would be if a customer was able to say to the AI, can you submit a credit card application at Bendigo Bank? And it's the AI then goes and pulls that data and presents it in a way that is much more likely to be accurate than a human. We still, in some places, are filling out manual forms. We're filling them out with a pen and scanning them and sending them back. So I think there needs to be a much greater focus. In order for us to really maximize the benefit, the data has to be right at the front. And often that front, it's a customer front end or it's a broker front end. And while we can do great things at the back, I think we're underselling the benefit of doing it more up towards the start of the journey.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue, actually, Anthony, in terms of, let's think kind of practicalities a little bit. What are the kind of the tips? What are the things that you can do from an operational environment, to the steps that you guys would recommend that you would go through to get yourself in that better position? Perhaps, Anna, if I can start with you, have you got some thoughts around how, practical examples of how you can do this?
Yeah, I'm not an expert, but what I'd say the most important thing is to break it down, chunk it down into bite-sized pieces. Don't try and boil the ocean. I think one of the challenges I'm hearing and I'm seeing and I've experienced historically is, you suddenly have this massive desire to use AI or fix your data, and it's so big that it goes in a too hard basket. So I think for me, practically, just think about it from the other angle. Rather than thinking, how can AI help me broadly, think about what is your problem? What problem are you trying to fix, or what question are you trying to answer? And then think about what data you need for that. Work out where you can find that data, how you extract it, and how you can use it. Once you've solved that one, move to the next one. Because I think this is part of the challenge, and what we're hearing is it's where do I start? So I say start from your problem, start from your challenge, and as small as it can be, just get going. That would be my kind of biggest piece of advice.
Yeah, I think that it's something that we see all the time. It's just the overwhelming nature of needing to solve it, and you've got to start, otherwise you don't finish or even move forward. Tim, from your perspective in terms of advising customers, what would you typically say to them in terms of the stages you would recommend?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of key things to consider. So one is just almost to the point Anna had around just careful selection of the use cases, I think, and where you want to apply this first, noting that you want to go to places in line with what Paul was saying around where the data is solid and it's going to give you the right kind of answer, because bad data in, you're going to get bad insights out. The other two key things in this is in order for AI to work really well in operations, we have to get two groups of people to collaborate really, really well. So you've got good data and technology people that understand the data environment and what AI is capable of, but they do not understand the operation and the use cases. And you've got operations people who are very time poor, often not great with data, but understand the specific problem. And you have to bring those two worlds together really carefully in order to elicit those use cases. So that's like the first barrier. And then the second thing that you want to think about as a step here is how you create the environment to be genuinely curious about what's possible and experiment and fail quickly. Because I think it's quite hard to imagine where this is going to end up at the start when you generate the business case. Whereas if you can create an environment where you can play, I think you'll learn an enormous amount about where it can go.
And I think there's a couple of really interesting things that you mentioned there. One of the things that I've seen actually more recently is this merging of IT and ops, and it's become so much so where actually the two groups are merging in some very large organizations around the world. And it comes back to that support point that Tom mentioned in one of the stats, is that from an ops perspective, do we have the right skills within the ops environment to be more data literate, to be able to use data more effectively, understand the importance of why data is important to capture correctly in the first place, all the way through then to understanding whether we can get support from other parts of the business, particularly IT, in order to help drive this adoption. Have you seen similar things within the organizations you're going to? Perhaps, I don't know, Anthony, do you want to have a comment on that?
Look, more broadly, I think Tim and Anna have already made some great points. The biggest struggle that I see today is it's a bit like if you go to the paint shop and you've got 82 different variations on white to pick from. You give people all that data and they just get lost in it. So having that real clear understanding of what your use cases are. So if you're in a call center, you want to know when are your operators high performing or underperforming, what skill sets are being used at what time of the day. I think that can be helpful. Then that's very different if you're in operations. Which fields in customer submissions are they struggling with? And then there's that opportunity to partner, not necessarily with tech, but partner with marketing and say, hey, can we change the form at the front end? There's clearly a gap. This is why we're losing customers. So chance to use AI and use the data in that way is really helpful. I'll touch on something that Tim said around getting comfort with it. For ops people out there, AI isn't going away. It's not something that if I ignore it for long enough, it's not going to impact me. So the sooner that people lean in on it, I think is really valuable. So for myself, the last 5 years, I've been getting reverse mentored by one of the young tech guys over at ANZ who had come from, I think it was Microsoft. And we'd spend an hour a week just talking about trends and talking about what's happening. For me to be able to get that better understanding of technology, the change that has made in the way that I approach these things has been great. So for the ops leaders out there, no matter your seniority, to be able to get in front of this is really important. because we know Paul and Bendigo Bank are just kind of up to about here with AI and are exploring opportunities. So you know that other banks are. So if you're one of those banks, you're in financial services, and you're not at least up to here in it, then you need to go out and you need to start to find ways to use it better.
That's a really interesting point in terms of with any new evolution of technology, it's about how do you adopt it and understand it and learn about it and evolve it. Paul, quick question for you, mate. What's your relationship like with IT? Come on, respond to that.
I'll answer that, but before I do, I'll answer my own question.
Go for it.
That I've been just mealing over there while I've been listening. So I have a slightly different view of this stuff, and as I was just reflecting, I've got the questions and synopsis here on my desktop looking at that. I almost think that we're trying to answer the perhaps problem questions that are about a year or two old. AI is here now. AI is here, and it's growing at an exponential rate. And we're trying to look at the current problems that we've got. How do I get real time? How do I package my data? How do I get AI comes in? You're not going to have to worry about real time data because it will all be doing it for you. You're not going to have to worry about getting insights because it'll be providing it for you. That your business, our businesses are going to functionally transform. And it isn't just going to be polished with AI, it's going to be centered with AI. And once that AI becomes more embedded in that, it's going to be truly transformational. You read all and listen to all the podcasts. This is arguably bigger than the Industrial Revolution. If you truly believe that, this isn't just going to be a nice little automation activity that'll help us get that and help me do my job better. It's going to fundamentally transform. So the questions that we're asking here relate to the problem statements that we've got now. They're almost going to evaporate when this stuff comes in because it'll replicate it all. Think about it as I tend to do the classic blockbuster. We're the blockbusters and we're trying to, this is interesting, digital's coming in and we can, CDs, this is the thing, we're going to have CDs and DVDs. We can put more on the shelves. That lasted for about 6 months before that. Digital turned away from DVD to streaming, and we all know what happened there. The problems that they were trying to solve in the, oh, this can work, we can put more on the shelves and we can get to that. Gone, it's streaming. And that's what we're facing. So for folks here, I think we've got to really get close to understanding what AI is, where it'll benefit us, and it won't just replace jobs. It'll be tactically replacing jobs of people who don't understand AI. If you understand and embrace AI, you're going to be, your job will change, your roles will change, but they'll be based around that way. So think about what problem statements that you're going to have in a year or 2 years' time, not just the current ones that you've got. It's an interesting thing for me as I try to reflect how will my job and our jobs change in the next 1 to 2 or 3 years. How many of those activities that we're doing now won't be there? Probably quite a lot.
Yeah. And how important has your journey been so far, Paul, with working closely with your IT colleagues, your tech colleagues?
Got a guy right next to me here who's leading, and I funded, you can see him there, and Tim knows who he is, who's very close to me in AI and tech. So the criticality of that, can't underestimate it. Probably not tech, to be honest. I'm probably closer because they're trying to get their heads around it too at the same point as we are.
Right.
It's our data and analytical colleagues that we're working more closely with on that front, and our transformation colleagues as well, because and trying to get the board members, and I've got 3 papers on my desk I'm writing now, and half of them have got the word AI written in them, again, as Tim knows, to understand the potential, because they're getting their heads around it because it's happening fast. How do we apply it? And more critically, how do we fund it?
Yeah, totally.
How much funding do we put to solving and embracing this new whizzy thing, AI, that we never talked about last year? It was all other stuff. Now it's AI. How do we fund that, and what do we not fund? Because we you don't get 30% more money magically appear. You've got to make that. You've got to not fund other things to fund that. So the board and the executive group are kind of balancing that. And I think our job as senior leaders, certainly as mine, and imagine for a lot of us here, is to articulate that as clearly as we can, where we see the benefits, what it's going to bring, and why it should be invested in, and any of the technologies that are coming in or the programs that are coming in, how it's going to align to that, where it aligns to that overall journey, how it's going to help growth, how it's going to help risk, how it's going to transform the business, how it's going to help our workforce footprint.
Yeah, no, I think Yes, absolutely. There's there is a whole spectrum of people sticking their head in the sand versus people that are wide open to what's coming, right? And it's the winners and losers are going to be determined by the adoption of that and how you use it in the real term use cases. One of the things that we see a lot, and let's kind of switch on to kind of use cases now for for AI. One of the things we hear a lot is, everybody gets the excitement and they love the excitement of AI, but practically, how do I actually use it in what are the use cases within? I don't know why my thumb came up. There we go. Why we should be using it, how we should be using it in operations. That's one of the questions that's popped in to the chat. Also, what are specific areas in operations that you could start with? What I will say is, as a starter for that discussion, is what I'm seeing when I talk to customers all over the world is there seems to be a going from maybe 12, 18 months ago where different departments are adopting AI, trying stuff, to now being centralized and central groups being formed within organizations that are the conduits towards testing AI, and then trying to figure out whether they invest and spend more in those use cases. So Tim, can I point to you? I mean, you obviously engage with lots of customers. How are you seeing that selection of AI happening within the organizations you engage with, and what are the kind of typical use cases you're seeing?
Yeah, so I'll give you a couple of early examples of things people are playing with at the moment. And I think what we're seeing is people thinking about AI agents kind of actually taking a role in a team and potentially working together as a team with slightly different roles and rules and that kind of stuff. So they're talking together, working together and learning. So there's a lot of potential around where this could go. In terms of some specifics that I've seen, though, in complaint handling, things like acknowledgement letters, drafting final response letters, exploring root cause analysis and systemic issues. For claims management, things like serving up insights to people that are making decisions and having fraud markers on cases to quickly highlight where there might be concerns or questions, and also recommending policy changes based on what they're seeing. Data insights for leaders from reporting so they can prepare for stand-up conversations and coaching conversations. Help and assist for contact center staff in the moment, assuming, of course, that the underlying knowledge management system is up to date and accurate. And triage and allocation of work. So a couple of quick examples.
Yeah. And Anna, from your perspective, I mean, what have you seen when you're engaging with customers?
Lots going on, but I think just to stick with my earlier comments about start simple, because of course, there's some awesome stuff Tim's talking about, AI agents sitting in the same team. There might be some people on, listening in thinking that is so far away from where we are. So it's just some really practical ones. I was talking to some clients last week, actually in New Zealand. One of them very, very simply is using AI to help with recruitment and operations. So they're using AI to assess resumes against job descriptions and capabilities, and then shortlisting candidates for them, right? So quite really simple, but a massive time saver. Another client is using AI kind of in the next iteration of OCR, so to be able to assess documents for outstanding requirements, for example, but with AI, that can be in any format whatsoever. And we know, like, going through client documents can be so time consuming. So again, massive value for them. So two really simple examples in case people are thinking, so I totally agree with you, PJ, that AI is here and it's going to transform the world. But when clients that we meet, organizations that we talk to are so far down that journey that Bhavesh showed at the beginning, from data drudgery all the way up to transformed organizations. When you're down here in data drudgery, still using spreadsheets, and there are organizations, many, 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 still using spreadsheets, you start to think about, how on earth am I going to catch up with AI? It feels like a world away. So really simple stuff. The two examples I gave you, you can start there. Yeah.
Can I just raise just a couple of points there and challenges? You're not going to have a choice, right? And this is we're not literally. I don't mean that to sound facetious. We aren't going to have a choice, because for the areas that aren't embracing it or are still going to we'll get to it, they're not going to be here. We're going to be a blockbuster overtaken by Netflix. companies and the people that are going to embrace, and you can see this now. You just need to look at the people who can get low cost outputs with high output with low cost and low, because they're using technologies and AI. Fintechs are a great example of that. Really challenging this on. You no longer can be a massive bank, or look at the car industry. Tesla's and stuff been really challenging some of the big hitters there. It's a tiny example of that. Businesses are going to quickly pivot in this, and they're going to be able to adapt and embrace AI. And those that have AI, when they can do understand customer sentiment, really easy to do. You can flick on that in Amazon Connect now, and so we're working on to understand that. You can then target your audience for growth opportunities, high propensity to understand. Paul might like this, Paul might like that product. Here's a product that AI can then start to match your product to your customers and your customer segmentation to your strategy. And then it goes a step further. It starts to evolve your strategy to meet where to your customer. No longer are you guessing your strategy. What you kind of do. AI plays in that space. For the other competitors who don't have that, they're not going to be around long enough, because that's what customers are going to gravitate to, because it's going to meet their needs, it's going to do it quick, and it's going to do it seamlessly. And so while we can sit and say, that's where I go back to my point on these other, and you've got to think, how do you, it's not winning your own race, right? You might be able to run 20% faster than you did last year. It's a race that you're up against 5 people next to you. How quick are they running, and how quick are they pulling away from us? I always say that when I look at this bank. It's great that we've got 20% better. They've got 40%.
Yeah.
We've gone a lot behind.
Yeah.
How do we maintain that pace, and how do we overtake? And that's a lot of the work that we're doing now. And Tim, you'll see this a lot in the big four, in the groups there. The amount of focus now on AI as a key differentiator, that you'll be coming into areas and launching and leading on these products and helping embrace on that, right?
Yeah. And Anthony, did you see that during your time in ANZ and your current experiences as a management consultant? You've seen that urgency within the organisation?
Yeah, so absolutely, and in fact, people that I'm talking to now are focused. Plenty of things that Tim said, and even quality control and quality checking is one that more and more people look into AI. The thing that I still don't see a lot of is, so it's shaping the way that we're processing. But I still think there can be a lot more can be done to use AI in operations for operations people, and to my earlier points around. Using the data better to understand where people are in contact centers and how they're performing versus their skill sets, or even having that better understanding of where in a process things are going wrong. I know it's funny, I've seen some of these amazing graphics that will show you, hey, these are your fail points, but I think there's opportunities there to use AI to be able to say, well, this is why, and how we get around them in the future. The few humans that Paul has left around the place are going to need to be really, really knowledgeable. They're going to really need to be empathetic and understanding. Really need AI to do everything else for them. So, it's a little bit like a heart surgeon who will probably eventually also be replaced by AI. But they come in, they don't open up the patient. They're not the one sticking the mask on the patient. They come in and they do this much work.
Yeah.
They pat themselves on the back and they go home. That's the future of operations, at least in the next couple of years. And then in 5 years, it's probably one guy pressing go on all the bots. But until then, we really need to look at, well, then how does AI enable that? And how do I elevate the people that are left to be able to handle so much more? Paul.
So
you're asking us where you think AI is going to impact. You're asking the wrong people. Let's ask AI, which I did. So I just did type 10. I thought, interesting to see that. I like to test this out a lot. Quite simple. Where will AI improve operations? Right, just as loose as that. No more defined than that. ChatGPT 4.0 gave me 12 areas: automation of routine tasks, predictive maintenance, demand forecasting, supply chain optimization, process optimization, improved decision making, quality control, workforce management, All these are interesting words for us.
Yes.
Customer service and support, risk management, which we covered, energy efficiency is an interesting one, customization operations for clients. The integration of AI in operations allow business to operate more effectively with reduced costs and increased agility, giving them an incredible, use the word there, competitive edge in today's fast-paced environment.
Well, I think that sums it up very, very well. So just a quick thing then, guys. I mean, we're running to the top of the hour, so I'm just going to close this off. But can I ask you, each of you, just a simple closing remark of your one piece of advice that you would give operational leaders as they get into this world of AI, as Paul says, it's here and we're ready to go. So I'm going to start with Anthony. What's your last piece of advice on this?
I'll probably borrow some from some of Paul's themes and say, get a time machine, go back a year and learn all you can about it. But no, I think the theme for me is as ops professionals, we all need to get on board sooner rather than later.
Great. Anna, what's your last remark?
Don't be overwhelmed. Don't let Paul scare the heck out of you. Get started as small as it is. Just get started, and once you get started, you'll move very quickly.
And then Tim?
Very similar theme. I think it's around just being curious about it to learn, and then have a spirit of experimentation, I think, to see what you can do. And
then Mr. Jamieson, your final word from you.
Well, I think I've said a lot, but get curious, get insightful. Don't be limited by your current problems that you've got now. Think about where those problems will look later on.
Fantastic. Well, listen, first of all, it's been a fantastic discussion. So thank you all for sharing some amazing insights, experiences, topics and things that you've been through. So let's just kind of wrap up the webinar. So we started at the start of the webinar thinking about where we were from an operations perspective, from a data perspective. And, I think it feels that based upon the discussion, we are still got a long way to go from an ops perspective to turn that data into insight that drives, the business drivers and the initiatives that we're looking for. And I think the one thing that came out pretty clearly is urgency, right? We have to get on board very, very quickly. So there is this urgency as well as this drive, and there's a lot we need to do in operations to move us to a position where we can start bringing in AI more effectively. So just a quick reminder, guys, if you haven't done so already, obviously Tom went through some of the data points, but the white paper is available. The link is in the chat. Please feel free to download that. You'll be able to see a lot more stats between country by country. And then finally, one of the things that we have as ActiveOps, we have our annual customer conference, which is going to be in, I was going to say Toronto, that's the first one. It's going to be in Melbourne on the 23rd of October, where we'll be spending a lot more time looking at what we call decision intelligence and how you can use AI more effectively, looking at use cases from customers across the region. So if you're interested, feel free to jump on and register. We look forward to seeing you there. So the final thing really as we wrap up is a final thank you again for our fantastic panelists. So thank you, Paul. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Anthony. I know you guys are busy executives, so thank you so much for taking the time and spending an hour with us sharing your insights. And for any of you that are interested in ActiveOps, please do follow us. We have a lot more content, a lot more thought leadership and thoughts around how you use AI within operations. Please follow us on all the usual social media channels, and there's lots more content on our website in terms of videos as well as thought leadership podcasts and so forth, delving into more of this topic. So all that remains for me to say is thank everybody for joining, and we look forward to seeing you all again next time in the next webinar.